When it comes to the economy, inflation is still high. Prices have not come down. Target, the retailer, said that prices may well go up this week because of Trump's trade tariffs. The price of eggs keeps on going up.
First, though, to the US, Donald Trump gave us, well, the full Donald last night, really, in a near 2-hour address to a joint session of the US Congress. He went on about the culture war victories he's claiming, and he denigrated his political opponents. He mentioned Joe Biden by name more than a dozen times.
Joe Biden especially let the price of eggs get out of control. The egg price is out of control, and we're working hard to get it back down. Secretary, do a good job on that. You inherited a total mess from the previous administration. Do a good job.
There we are. Let's talk to the Times US correspondent, Charlotte McDonald-Gibson. Charlotte, good afternoon from us.
Good afternoon.
Actually, the price of eggs has gone up on Donald Trump's watch, hasn't it? We ought to nail that one first, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, not a day goes past where there's not a fascinating egg story that we could write. I think the most recent one was how they're now catching eggs being smuggled over the Mexico border because, you know, it seems like they're worth more than smuggling drugs. So, yes, eggs are a big, big story here. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, you mentioned that the president mentioned Biden a number of times. And I think it's interesting. It's on those areas where we haven't seen, where Trump cannot basically say, well, I've done this, I have achieved this, because he hasn't when it comes to the economy. Inflation is still high. Prices have not come down. Target, the retailer, said that prices may well go up this week because of Trump's trade tariffs. The price of eggs keeps on going up. So it's very noticeable that when he mentioned Biden, it was on these issues where there has been no movement, none of the promised change that his government, that he promised during his election campaign.
Right. I mean, how much longer can he keep on doing that, do you think?
Well, that's a good question, because, you know, what it boils down to is that, you know, the economy was probably the reason why a lot of people decided to vote for Donald Trump. And since he's come into office, he has done many executive orders on many of the more sort of, you know, culture wars issues. If we're talking about the DEI initiatives, if we're talking about the transgender issue, you know, he can say, well, I've done this on this, and this. But is this the reason why the vast majority of people voted for Trump? Or was it the economy? And I think, you know, the analysis after the election was the economy was a huge part of it. So he is going to have to show some progress on that. Now, sort of economists, political analysts say he's got a grace period. And obviously, he keeps on blaming the previous administration. That's going to work for a bit. But people sort of say, let's look 6 months, 12 months down the line. If prices aren't coming down then, that's when he's going to really have some tough questions to answer.
OK, it wasn't without interruption, the speech last night. Let's hear what happened when the Democrat Al Green got involved.
By big numbers and won counties in our country.
OK, so a protest by this Democrat congressman pretty much drowned out by those shouts from Trump supporters. What was he protesting about?
Al Green, well, he was very focused on the Medicaid. He was sort of saying, you know, talking about the cuts, saying, you know, we need to protect our Medicaid. So it was interesting because you did have Democrats in Congress yesterday, and they all seem to have a very different approach to this speech. I mean, Al Green was the only one who was really vocally heckling the president, and he was removed quite quickly from the chamber. A lot of the other Democrats had basically like ping pong paddles in black with sort of white writing on saying, against Musk or the word false or the word protect veterans. But it didn't have a huge impact, I would say. I mean, some Democrats walked out during the speech. I think there were about sort of a chunk of sort of 12 empty seats by the end of his address. So it was a little bit piecemeal. It didn't feel like the Democrats had coordinated how they wanted to respond to this speech, whereas the Republicans, they were on their feet, even in the 2 hours long, they were up and down on their feet clapping. It must have been good exercise for them because they were very united.
That does seem to be a recurring theme, that the Democrats simply don't know how to react. I mean, that can't go on much longer either, can it? They've got to get themselves together and become much more cohesive.
Yeah, and they've got to work out what the issues are that they really need to go after. I think we saw that after the USAID cuts, we really had a lot of the Democrats going outside the USAID headquarters and protesting there and giving speeches. And I'm not sure that fully resonated with the public because the message coming out from the Trump administration and from the Department of Government Efficiency about all these figures. I mean, that's quite potent. And Trump raised them again last night. All these figures that he says, USAID was spending X million on X ridiculous project, and that's a very powerful message, whereas the Democrats attempting to defend that didn't really chime. So it's about finding the messages that are going to resonate. And I think the interesting one now that we're seeing is this sort of upswelling against Elon Musk, against the Department of Government Efficiency. And when we're seeing things like national parks, for example, being affected, that's something that people feel very passionate about in the United States. They're very proud of the national parks. So I think there's some issues there that if they find them, they can push on them. But right now they're struggling. They're struggling to find the leadership. They're struggling for a coherent message. They're struggling on what to pick up on when there is just this onslaught of policies, of orders. Which ones do you pick to fight? And they've got to figure that out.
Yeah, well, I think they really have, and probably quite soon. Let's talk about Ukraine and the idea that the US has withdrawn intelligence sharing. Now, potentially, this could be extraordinarily dangerous, well, catastrophic, frankly. But there are also stories today that they might restore it at some point. So what do you know for certain about all this?
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult to keep track of something that they might do and then they don't. Or if we look at the military aid, I mean the British government was quite convinced they weren't going to withdraw military aid, and then they did overnight. So it's very, very difficult to keep track of what will happen, what they're threatening is going to happen, what the implications will be. I think and it was quite interesting in President Trump's speech last night that on Ukraine, he wasn't as negative as he could have been. He didn't really reference the meeting, that disastrous meeting with Zelensky in the Oval Office last Friday. It was a little bit more conciliatory. So we'll have to see what happens on this. Same with the intelligence sharing. Obviously, that's something that's of huge importance to the Europeans as well. So I think it's a case of wait and see. It's very up in the air at the moment. And as you mentioned, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is here to meet Pete Hegseth today. So there are talks going on. There's so much diplomacy going on. Macron is suggesting a meeting back in Washington with Starmer next week. So, I mean, the intensity of what is happening on all fronts at the moment is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some sources of breaking news here in the UK. She says pompously, I'm actually talking about the telly and Sky News, Charlotte. And it says that Ukrainian sources are saying that the CIA is the body that is saying it might restore intelligence sharing. And you'd have to assume that there will be some people within the CIA who feel very strongly that they don't want to keep important information away from the Ukrainian authorities because, I mean, it shouldn't need to be said really, but innocent lives are at stake here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been the sort of rallying cry of Trump and his Vice President J.D. Vance. It's about protecting the innocent lives. So I think there will be a realization. I mean, there is a lot of concern about the intelligence agencies and the security agencies here in the US under the new leadership. Obviously, Tulsi Gabbard, there has been a concern that intelligence agencies won't necessarily want to share with the US because there's sort of a lack of trust in the figures that we have leading these agencies now. So it's going to be a huge issue. And I think that at the moment, the CIA, the US intelligence agencies will want to present that idea that they are a trustworthy partner for the rest of the world. They don't want to lose out on the intelligence. So I think, that's the message they're going to want to be getting across at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. One thing's for certain is that nothing seems to be certain. We can rely on that. Elon Musk has, he cut a very respectable figure at that speech in Congress yesterday. Has he been lying low after a fashion for the last couple of days?
Does he ever lie low? I'm not sure. I was struck by his suit, and I wondered if that was a bit of a dig at Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, because Musk is usually seen in that sort of black MAGA gear. He's always branded with the sort of Doge T-shirts, and I'm pretty sure he's selling them as well. So to see him in this sort of very smart suit is quite unusual. And of course, at that Oval Office meeting on Friday, Zelensky had been taken to task for not wearing a suit. So I did wonder if that was a little bit of a dig. I don't, I'm pretty sure that Elon Musk is as vocal as ever on Twitter. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out, because, that's possibly one area where Trump is getting some pushback from within his own party. It makes sense for him to keep Elon Musk close, so you'd be a somewhat lightning rod for the criticism. So, how long Musk will want to continue to play that role for is another question.
Yes, that's a very good point. Thank you very much indeed for your time. That's Charlotte McDonald-Gibson.
Plenty of texts and messages this afternoon. Thank you for all of them. 0333 003 2353 on the WhatsApp, Jane and Fee at times.radio on the email. Chris in Fleet says it's strange that in an advanced political system such as in the USA, there isn't a recognised leader of the opposition. Matt in Nottingham says, I'm curious about whether any Americans are aware that they sound like thick yobs when they chart USA to many of us. And Glyn, in terms of reboot suggestions, would like to cast our minds back to Shoestring, a crime-solving radio presenter. In fact, it could be relaunched as crime-solving radio and podcast presenters.
Yeah, how
well,
about
that would bring it all up to speed in 2025.
We'd have to live on that boat.
I don't want to live on a boat with you. That's all right.
Fair enough.
I think maybe the Rockford Files. I'm quite happily live in a trailer with you somewhere.
Oh,
it was a nice trailer, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was quite a beautiful banquette seating, from what I remember. If you would like to listen to, or indeed watch, all of President Trump's address, you can do so on the Times Radio YouTube channel or on the free Times Radio app.
I do think Chris in Fleet's point is a very good one, and you raised it there with Charlotte. It just seems very strange to us, this side of the pond, that there isn't one person who can stand up and say the opposition would like to question this, because just the amount of things being thrown out by Trump that don't bear checking against any factual source would give so much ammunition to an opposition in this country. It just seems a very strange time to not be able to find just one voice. Because, the material is there, isn't it?
Oh, it certainly is. Well, as our guest on the Mars trip was saying in the last hour, David Whitehouse, they're not going to go to Mars.
Yeah.
There's no way they can. So why did he say it? Well, because he can say it.